Good afternoon. I'd like to call the March 1st, 2016 City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Dominguez. Here. Hart. Here. Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo. Here. Rouse. White. Here. And Mayor Schneider.
Here. And item number one.
Item number one, proclamation declaring Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History's 100th anniversary.
You only turn 100 once, right? This is a big deal. The Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, founded in 1916, aims to spark curiosity and ignite a passion for nature by expanding our understanding of the natural world, share the process of discovery, and communicate the interconnectedness of all species. And the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History promotes the preservation of the Earth's natural systems as an urgent priority and fosters a sense of collective responsibility necessary for maintaining biodiversity and for the well-being of our own species. And the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History is a community resource and a welcoming, accessible center for community engagement that uses the full range of the human experience to reach and connect people of all ages and backgrounds, transcending geographic, economic, and cultural boundaries. And the museum strives to encourage community involvement and foster an appreciation for Santa Barbara's distinct natural history through substantial collections and research, exhibits, public education events, and lectures, and public school programs. So therefore, I, Mayor Helene Schneider, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby acknowledge and thank the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History for its 100 years of service of providing science and nature education to generations of visitors throughout California. The museum's mission is to inspire a thirst for discovery, and a passion for the natural world has created an impact in Santa Barbara and beyond. And congratulations on this amazing anniversary. Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to say anything?
Madam Mayor, City Council members, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the museum, present and past for 100 years, thank you for this honor, for this recognition, and thank you for your support over the last 10 decades. Together, we have done great things, and great things await us in the future. So it will be a pleasure to continue to work with you and all of us that are going to be in all these chairs for the next 100 years. I know we'll have just as great a relationship. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And that was Luke Swetland, who's are you President, CEO, or Executive Director? President, CEO, right? Yes, and congratulations, and be a great event I think you're having coming up this weekend to celebrate. Fantastic. Item number two.
Item number two, employee recognition, service award pins.
Mr. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council members, each month we like to recognize employees for achieving certain milestones in their work with the City of Santa Barbara. And so today I'd like to read some names into the record and recognize their achievements for service with the city. With 10 years of service to the city, Crystal Bedoya, police officer in the police department. Michael Clunan, senior engineering technician, Public Works Department. Gary Gaston, police officer, police department. Nicole Casper, building inspector aide, community development department. Michelle Sanchez, accounting assistant, finance department. David Thornburg, senior real property agent, Public Works Department. With 15 years of service, the fire department did some hiring 15 years ago. We have Barrett Hoffman, fire captain with the fire department. Chad Hunt, a police officer with the police department. Robert Jensen, a fire engineer with the fire department. Trevor Jones, fire engineer, fire department. Bradley Waters, fire captain, fire department. Matthew Wilson, fire captain, fire department. And Susan Young, Neighborhood and Outreach Services Supervisor with the Parks and Recreation Department. With 20 years of service to the city, Carlos Lamas, Meter Reader, Water Distributor Operator 2, Public Works Department. Sean Mapes, Fleet Services Technician 1, Public Works Department. And Bob Samaro, Finance Director with the Finance Department. With 25 years of service, Fernando Banales, Streets Maintenance Worker 2, Public Works Department. John Booth, Streets Maintenance Worker 2, Public Works Department. Georgia Lopez, Streets Maintenance Coordinator, Public Works Department. And Leaf Reynolds, Project Engineer 2 with the Public Works Department.
Great. Congratulations to everyone. Any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Public comment. We have a number of speaker slips here. We have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Wayne Scholes, to be followed by Pete Del Bello.
I'm here today to talk about the article in the news press with the interim chief Krumbach, and I want to say I had a chance to speak to him earlier, and he's about 1,000,000 times better than the little sucker that left here that should have been fired. I got his card, and I'm going to meet with him, and I'm going to talk to him about all the cover-up that's been happening in this city. That chief of police should have been fired instead of allowing him to retire. There's been too many citizens in this city whose rights have been violated by the chief of police and several other officers and other people in this city that have had direct cover-ups by the city administrator's office, the mayor's office, the district attorney's office, and the city attorney's office. It's your job to protect the public, not to protect somebody who's violating our rights. And hopefully we will get somebody else as a full-time chief of police that understands that he is a public servant, not self-serving like Scam Sanchez, the chief of police. This city has got to change. We have been going downhill for a long time, not just with the congestion of the traffic, but the people. If anybody reads this, there's not a single thing that says that the chief did a great job or they appreciate what the city administrator or the district attorney or the mayor or the city attorney's office did to make this city better. It was 15 years of hell that we had to live through because we knew we were not going to be backed up by the people that have jobs, paying jobs in this city, whose job it is to protect us. It's about time things change, and I also want to finish up by saying the last thing this state needs is Helene Snyder going to Washington, D.C., and I'll be covering that issue later on. I'm going to remind the public about a lot of stupid things she's done and a lot of stupid ideas she's come up with. Thank you.
Pete Del Bello and Michael Marinda, you're waiving your 2 minutes to him. Okay, so you have up to 4 minutes, to be followed by David Williams.
Okay. Madam Mayor and City Council, my name is Pete Del Bello, and I am a Santa Barbara native. As many of you already know, I love history, especially Santa Barbara history. So I want to congratulate the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, which is located in District 4, on their 100th anniversary. Also want to mention Councilman Hotchkiss. I want to compliment you on your opinion column that was in Sunday's News Press regarding the bike plan. I agree with you, sir, 100%. I also like what Bill McFadden of Newshawk wrote about this issue, especially the following comment. One glaring omission of the nearly 100-page bike master plan proposal is the quote, the absence of the reference to where those Mitchell-Terrena residents will park their cars in the future. I also agree with Mr. McFadden that, quote, a better idea would be to put this issue on the next city ballot in 2017. At last week's city council meeting, the upcoming COMB meeting on Monday, March the 7th was mentioned. I know most of the people watching don't really know what COMB is. I grew up with water issues. My father was worked for the city water department and was with the Montecito Water District. And COMB stands for Cachuma Operation and Maintenance Board. Water is obviously a big issue here, not only in our city, but our county and state as well. COMB coordinates closely with the Bureau of Reclamation and the staffs of member units to ensure that water supplies meet daily demands. Both the City of Santa Barbara and Montecito Water District are members of COMB, as well as Carpinteria Valley Water District, Goleta Water District, and San Ynez River Water Conservation District, Improvement District Number 1. The Monday, March 7th meeting will take place at 1 p.m. at the COMB boardroom at 3301 Laurel Canyon Road in Santa Barbara. I hope the media, as well as members of the general public, attend. It'll be the highlight of my social calendar. And next, I have two more items within my 4 minutes. As a proud member of the Santa Barbara Police, as a proud supporter of the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association, I wanted to publicly compliment City Administrator Paul Casey on the appointment of Interim Police Chief John Krombach. Well, I know, as I mentioned to Chief Krombach before the meeting, I know he doesn't want the permanent position, but I really like his leadership skills, and I think the next chief should share his leadership philosophy. Since we can't clone him, that's just my suggestion. And on a sad note, I want to mention the passing of a local teacher, my friend Carla Icavetti, who died on February 17th. She was an English teacher at Bishop Diego High School. Carla had a big heart. Everyone who came in contact with her could see that and knew that she cared about them. She was also an incredible screenwriter. A celebration of her life will take place on Saturday at 5 p.m. at Bishop Diego High School. People are asked to wear pink, which I don't have. I'll have to, I guess, buy a scarf or a handkerchief or something afterwards, because I obviously have a love for purple. But I just want to pass that information along to the mayor and city council, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you. David Williams will be followed by Kenneth Locke.
Thank you. I'm here to invite everyone to join the Santa Barbara Peace March from outside City Hall at 11 a.m. Friday, March 11th, the 5th Fukushima anniversary. We'll walk a few blocks to the courthouse lawn, where a sacred circle ceremony will be convened at noon by local Chumash elder Art Cisneros. This short peace march will kick off this year's Rainbow Uprising campaign, which was initiated in 1990 when we installed the Hiroshima Peace Flame at UCSB. This short peace march will be carrying peace proclamations from 3 Santa Barbara mayors, along with a light from the UCSB Eternal Flame, blessed by 2 generations of Chumash elders, to light the council fire at the Spiritual Unity Summit in Taos, New Mexico, starting on the August 20th, White Buffalo Day, which annually celebrates the apparent 1994 fulfillment of the Lakota prophecy of hope for these times, predicted 19 generations ago. I have a few of these little handouts back there about the circle and the walk. If you want a reminder, pick it up. And here's the last set. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenneth Locke will be followed by Aylin Casas.
My name is Kenneth Locke. I'm going to talk about the intelligence of this community and the idea of how it increases its intelligence now. I'm bringing to the table the idea of being able to recognize the difference between an athletic discipline or a mind-body exercise and a sport. And it turns out that tennis, because I'm here to actually I have this project, I call it the Tennaissance Method. It's going to bring tennis into a renaissance. The idea is that tennis has been limited to a sport. And how do we understand what a sport is? It's actually something that we use for play. So tennis, you play it. You have fun. And then what's happened is that it really has an increased intelligence in relation to developing the fundamentals. And I was able to take it so far as to develop both arms in relation to the fundamentals. So ultimately, I represent the standard now of an athlete who has an integrated mind and body, holistic health. And again, going back to what's kind of holding us back or holding some people in this community back is the fact that they maybe are satisfied with playing tennis and not really learning how to, the basis of how they will learn and increase their intelligence and increase their coordination. So the idea is, I did a tweet on Twitter saying the idea is when a person that plays tennis, when they choose not to learn. So ultimately, when a person says, I'm too old to learn, well, they're still learning, but the problem is again, it's kind of in a lower place where they're just kind of satisfied with playing tennis. And I'm sorry to say that just operates at a lower level of intelligence. Thank you.
Aileen Casas will be followed by James Padden Rubin. You can bring that all the way down. I do the same thing. Go ahead. All right. There you go.
Okay, hello. My name is Aileen Casas. I'm an 8th grader at Anacapa School. My class and I were recently discussing about putting in the bike lanes on Michelle Turner Street. We thought that Sola Street would have been a better option than Michelle Turner Street just because it's less crowded, and Sola Street is also wider than Michelle Turner Street. While we were, we took a tour down to Michelle Turner Street, and while we were there, we talked to some residents. We went into a few local businesses, and then we looked around in the apartments. We found out, we talked to a resident, and they said that the street on Michelle Turner Street was already, they were using those parking spaces, so taking away all those parking spaces would mean they would have to park in other streets, so it would be inconvenient for them. When we went into a local business, they also said that it was going to impact how many customers came in, because many customers would park along that street and walk into that business and buy a few things and then come out. We noticed that we saw an apartment that was a 15-room apartment and had 15 parking spaces. We also noticed that many people own a little more over one car, which means that they would have to park outside, which would also impact that. So we thought that Sola Street was a better option than Michelle Turner Street. Thank you.
Thank you. James Padden Rubin, be followed by Nancy Gottlieb.
Hello, my name is James Padden Rubin. I'm a 7th grader at Anacapa School, and today I would like to speak about my opinion for the proposed plan to put bike lanes on Mitchell Traina Street. I have visited with my class the Mitchell Traina community multiple times on fact-finding tours and have learned a lot. This which has influenced my opinion. There are some single-family homes where there's enough parking, but in much of the community, there are big housing developments with some 15 or more houses. Some of these houses are fortunate enough to have one parking space, while others have even less. Most families have at least 2 cars. By taking away the parking, the house values are decreased, which is hard for some families. As a cyclist, I ride all around Santa Barbara. Some streets have bike lanes, while some don't. I have never been hit and ride alongside cars easily. Cyclists can't always have bike lanes. They must adapt to the cities they're biking in. I have spoken to many residents, and all of them have disagreed with having the bike lanes. They say how they need all of the parking spaces they can get, and how some don't even have parking spaces in their houses. They must park 3 blocks away. And I'm done.
Thank you very much. We missed you guys last week. Nancy Gottlieb and Yvonne Ashton, are you here? You're giving your 2 minutes to her? Okay, so Ms. Gottlieb, you have up to 4 minutes.
I just want to say Anacapa Junior High, you guys rock. Really. What a nice surprise. Hi, Mayor, councilpersons. I'm here representing the Mitchell Traina Neighborhood Association, and I just have a few comments. The public and the council were blindsided by the interoffice memo that was prepared by city staff and dated February 22nd. This memo made major changes to Appendix C of the 2016 Master Bicycle Plan, even though it was characterized as merely a correction of misstatements. This memo, in fact, made substantive insertion of 6 pages of traffic and safety analysis. The public was not given adequate time to digest and respond to the changes of facts, and this could change the testimony that was given at the meeting last week. The pro-Mitchell Traina bike lane advocates were advocating for a version of the Mitchell Traina plan that no longer existed at the time of the meeting. Many of them learned only after the fact that the city is now proposing a Phase 1, Phase 2 plan, and the initial phase would only provide a partial solution to the Green Lane. Nor do they know that Phase 2 is likely going to cost more than the projected costs of a Solis Street option. The 2/22/16 memo makes it clear that the Mitchell-Terrena project is not exempt from CEQA because of the revelation that the street widening is required to complete Phase 2, including relocation of utilities, light poles, traffic signals, and related communication facilities. Yet there was no deliberation on the consideration of this rather important fact. No cost estimates were given for the new Phase 2 on Mitchell-Terrena, and as a result, the public and the council were given inaccurate and outdated estimates of what Mitchell-Terrena would really cost. Had they been given accurate costing, the council would certainly have given more consideration to the alternative routes like Solis Street, which I now think is less expensive. The City Council made a motion and took a vote without being fully informed by the City Attorney that based on this new information, the Bicycle Master Plan almost certainly triggered a CEQA requirement. Therefore, the Council was acting on incomplete and erroneous information. As a result of these facts, we, the Mitchell-Terrena Neighborhood Association, believe the City Council should, on March 15th, take a vote for reconsideration of the Bicycle Master Plan pending receipt of the legal and the financial information that they are currently lacking, and not to proceed with any advanced design work until planning issues have been resolved and the alternatives to Mitchell-Terrena have been fully vetted. Thank you very much.
Phil Walker will be followed by Tom Woodrow.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. A lesson in history today. Approximately a year and a half ago, the Parker family was sitting right across from me, and Eli Parker, Fess's son, was sitting right adjacent to me right here. RE, their property on Cabrillo Boulevard. Okay. And then there's been a bit of a controversy about the selling of the Parker Family Trust Camp 4 property to the Chumash tribe, which it's the best thing for that area, and it's a done deal. But it turns out, reading the Old Farmer's Almanac, there's a piece in here about General Lee's surrender to General Grant at Appomattox, And in here it mentions a lieutenant colonel in the staff of General Grant, Lieutenant Colonel Eli S. Parker. And my brother and I and my dad and mom had occasion to visit the Disney Studios in 1955, a day or two after Disneyland opened. We had the good fortune, my brother and I, to sit on Fess Parker's lap and had the picture. My brother still has the picture, and he did have some Native American features, and it could be, I haven't researched it yet, my wife is part Cherokee. It could be that this Eli Parker is part of that familial history. And I'll finish on this. When he was introduced to Parker, General Lee said, "I'm glad to see one real American here." And Colonel Parker later said, I shook his hand and said, "We are all Americans." So hopefully the water situation will be worked out. I'm going to the COMB meeting on Monday. Thank you.
Tom Woodrow will be followed by Brooke Teal Robbins, and the final speaker will be Crucito Herrera Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to counter something that was said earlier at public comment, I'm grateful to the mayor for the way you perform your duties here with grace and competence as our mayor. Moving on, I just want to let you know, City Watch, the group that I represent, we had a meet and greet over at the University Club the other day. It was attended by about 50 people, and it was a lot of support, and I just wanted to keep you abreast of kind of our group is growing, and they're interested in what you're doing here as representatives of the city, and largely supportive, but want to participate and help wherever we can. Regarding the Bike Master Plan, I think there was a general disagreement with the 5-2 decision, but in light of we appreciate the City Attorney Errol Colon bringing up the letter from Price Postel and Parma. And in that light, and with regard to what might be a fiscal liability from a CEQA review, obviously we're very concerned with fiscal responsibility and agree with the previous speaker that maybe it's time to go back and revisit that in the next week or next couple of weeks, and pending the outcome of whether or not you do need a CEQA review for the bike master plan, since it would be expensive to do that, that you might consider maybe changing that vote or backing off on it until you get more information. So thank you very much.
Brookteal Robbins, and is Jonathan here? And you're giving your 2 minutes to Ms. Robbins? Okay. Go right ahead, Ms. Robbins. You have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor, Council. Earth Day is the largest secular holiday in the world. The great legacy of Santa Barbara. Proud to say my hometown. Yet even with inspiring stories like COP21 and the local efforts by the Sustainability Committee here in Santa Barbara, an environmental issue remains, and that's waste. The Department of Recycling and Trash, or rather Trash and Recycling, is a contradiction. Foreign countries are making progress with legislation, and they're making money too. But the World Climate Agreement, that seems so promising, we have to realize is non-binding. America must voluntarily join the no waste movement to understand and participate, known as the circular economy movement. To stop climate change, it is in the best interest of Santa Barbara to create a circular economy policy, a zero waste policy. Zero waste is not impossible. Even New York, that is known for landfill, that you can see from space, is going zero waste, which is awesome. San Francisco is too. Local technology, right here in Santa Barbara, companies like Curvature, who partners with Dell, saves over 1,000 tons of e-waste from landfill here in Santa Barbara County each year. So we can make a difference. We can do something about climate change. We can invest more than in landfill. We can invest in zero waste. So please, this Earth Day, do not just have the belief that we should care about our Earth and go green, but this Earth Day, not only endorse the Congressional Progressive Caucus Climate Resolution, make circular economy part of your ongoing agenda. Make a commitment to the community, to the Earth, and humanity, because the community will benefit from your leadership. Lots of people think that when birds are extinct or animals go extinct, that's a sad thing. But to really put it in perspective, even kids understand that, well, wait a minute, if animals and birds are going extinct, what about us? What about humanity? What will happen to us? So all these issues on the agenda constantly are important and must be a priority. But climate change, the circular economy movement must be understood and participated in, or else there is no history except for our own. And the only thing I want to put in the natural history is the linear economy. And I want us to go forward with the circular economy. I hope you participate and join. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
And Crucito Herrera Cruz.
Good afternoon, Mayor Helene Schneider, district-based members, and at-large members. I'm here in recognition. My name is Crucito Herrera Cruz. I was a plaintiff for the California Voting Rights Act against the city. When we pledge to the allegiance and we say justice for all, in the spirit of the Business Improvement District on Milpas in District 1, there's nothing happening to mediate the two competing proposals. The responsibility of having quarterly meetings with your constituencies to resolve this, to maybe get a TOT monies, revenues situated in the community, do some infrastructure building in the Milpas corridor, or a measure bond, which is non-offensive. However, the lack of leadership in not doing it has made me rise up and speak up today. Where's the district-based management process with the Mitchell-Terrena car, bike, community dilemma? Nothing. Absence. We should not have youth articulating the concerns of the leadership. We should hire them. It's critical. We have to understand a bike lane is a bike lane, but a bicyclist has a permanent right of way, even with 6 feet. By law, vehicle code says it. So drivers should know this. We as drivers should already know this. When bicyclists are on the road, there's a 6 feet bubble. We don't need bike lanes. Aren't we all CDL carriers? In that district-based management style, we look at what's happening with out-of-town students coming to Santa Barbara City College and replacing community students that could go to there. The Lower West Side Project doesn't even look like my community when I was born and raised. What's going on? Well, I'd like to say God bless y que Dios los bendiga.
We have one final speaker, Lanny Ebenstein.
Mayor Schneider, members of the council, I'd like to address you briefly today on the bicycle plan in the city of Santa Barbara. And I know it's an issue that's been before you recently. I'd like to urge you to reconsider the Mitchell-Terena Street option, and that's for several reasons. First, I think it's the legal reason. I think that the original idea was that painting green stripes would mean there wouldn't have to be review if other work didn't have to be done, but it looks like other work does have to be done. So that means that it's a process that will require further review. And it'll also require further cost. And it very well may be the case that the cost of making Mitchell-Terena Street able to have a bike lane on it would be less than the cost of putting in lights on Sola Street. And as someone who is a bike rider in the city of Santa Barbara, I think that it would make more sense for the reasons of 1/10 the traffic, the vehicular traffic on Sola is on Mitchell-Terena. I think that would be a better reason. And then also the fact that it's wider. And if now it even turns out that it would cost less or cost a comparable amount, I think that for all those reasons it would be desirable for the council to reconsider whether the Mitchell-Terena option is the best at this time or whether it would be better to go down Sola Street instead. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, that concludes public comment. We're on to the consent calendar, and there's some items to read.
Item number 4, adoption of ordinance for lease agreement with Chandlery on the Breakwater Incorporated. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Chandlery on the Breakwater Incorporated at an average initial base rent of $1,541.15 per month for the premises located at 125 Harbor Way, Suites 3, 4, and 5, effective April 1, 2016. Item number 5, adoption of ordinance extending lease agreements with Santa Barbara Unified School District for Fire Station number 5 and Eastside Library. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara authorizing the city administrator to execute amendments extending the term of lease agreement number 4840 for use and maintenance of Fire Station number 5 with the Santa Barbara Unified School District and lease agreement number 24336 with the Santa Barbara Unified School District for its use of a portion of the East Side Library and Franklin Center real property, both through April 30th, 2018. Item number 6, grant from California State Parks Division of Boating and Waterways for replacement of pump-out facilities. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara requesting a grant in the amount of $73,000 from the California State Parks Division of Boating and Waterways for the replacement of boat pump-out facilities at Santa Barbara Harbor. And item number 7, resolution accepting grant deed from the Trust for Public Land for vacant land along Lower Arroyo Borough watershed. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara accepting a grant deed from the Trust for Public Land for real property along the Lower Arroyo Borough watershed.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll wait for the reading. Mr. Dominguez, did you want to pull something off? We also have a speaker slip for item 7. Okay, item 11. So why don't we go in order? Number 7, if I think you read already, this is the grant deal from the Trust for Public Land for vacant land along Lower Arroyo Borough watershed. Mr. Woodrow, you had to speak on this?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Tom Woodrow, City Watch. Just in this regard, the item came up over the summer, and Madam Mayor, you pointed out to me at the time that the city had voted on this piece of property before I got there and did my job, and I understand that. I was still making the point, though, nonetheless, that it does cost money to take land off the public rolls. It could be it kind of hamstrings a council, future councils. Someday someone might want to develop that. But yes, I get that the city voted that way. But I want to enter into the record that at City Watch we're always concerned with your finances and city's finances, and that sometimes when you restrict yourself by setting aside that land from future tax rolls, that's going to impact finances for the future, especially when the city isn't really flush with money. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Can you read item 11, please?
Item number 11, amendment to the professional services contract for background investigations regarding police department personnel.
Mr. Dominguez?
I wanted to ask for a little more background on this issue.
Go ahead. Now's your chance. Mr. Case?
Madam Mayor, council members, I'll start, and then if Chief Carmack wants to fill in, that's fine. As you know, retention and recruitment is a top priority for the police department. Recruitment is an intensive effort that requires background investigations. We have staff on board under contract to do those background investigations, but with this emphasis of hopefully getting more people into the system and into our recruitment, we want to bring in extra resources to help with those background investigations, and that what this professional service contract would do.
Okay, Chief?
I can't beat that. That was very well
there
done.
you go. Good answer. Anything, Mr. Dominguez, did you have other questions about?
What would the money then go to? It would go towards background checks for new hires in the upcoming 6 months?
It'll be a contingency. We'll do everything we can to keep it with the in-house hourly staff, but in the event we're processing people now. We're giving an entry-level test here shortly, and we anticipate some very good candidates. It's an extremely competitive market. We're competing with Ventura County and other Santa Barbara County agencies. And when we identify those, we would use these as a contingency to farm those out to the private investigative firm to do those, so we don't lose them to other places.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Do you need to vote on that separately, or are you satisfied? Okay. Do we have a motion for the consent calendar?
Move the consent calendar, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Rouse, second by White. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. That's unanimous. On to report from the Finance Committee. Mr. Hart.
The Finance Committee met in what is the first of a series of meetings to discuss options for increasing street program infrastructure funding. Encourage people to participate and join us. It's a very complicated subject, and it really will benefit from having the background involved in that decision-making process.
Great. Report from the Ordinance Committee, Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Ordinance Committee met today to amend the municipal code to allow our building department to combine water, sewer, and refuse pickup in some accounts that aren't already included, primarily commercial accounts. And I want to take just a brief moment to acknowledge Mr. Siki and his class of Anacapa for a wonderful student project. I think that's a lot better than the civics class I had when I was in school, so well done.
Great. You're welcome anytime to public comment or any item on the agenda. So good to see you. Okay, item number 14.
Item number 14, vacation rental enforcement update.
Okay, Mr. Cato or...
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I will do much of the presenting today. That's not an indication of who's been doing the work, however. Most of the work has come out of community development. Mr. Doimus of my office is here. He, along with one of our paralegals, has borne the laboring oar in our office. Last August, you asked us to come back with a 6-month report on the status of enforcement. That's what we're doing today. The overview slide up there describes 7 areas that we want to focus on. I think the council should be familiar with all of those areas, but we wanted to amplify on them. And you may wonder halfway through this presentation why a 5-page report requires 16 PowerPoint slides, but I hope you'll bear with me. We're going to look at the legislative subpoenas, settlement agreements, some new research we're working on, staffing, the public information letter council asked us to prepare back in August, the zoning enforcement update, and a finance department update. Let me jump right in. The council authorized legislative subpoenas back in August of 2015, and we had many dozen hosting platforms that we thought were the proper subjects of subpoenas. We've issued 19 subpoenas thus far, and they've produced a total of 34 enforcement actions to date. We have about 30 more subpoenas that we'll be issuing in March, and we expect that to conclude the first round of the subpoena effort. We have had one hosting platform refuse to comply with the subpoena. We are prepared to go to court during March to attempt to get a court order enforcing the subpoena. The complaint about the subpoena from the hosting platform that is refusing to comply revolves around privacy interests. We tried to make accommodations to assure that any personal privacy interests were protected. We've been unsuccessful negotiating. I would add that Mr. Doimus has done quite a bit of negotiating with hosting platforms to allow them to respond to the legislative subpoenas in a fair and comprehensive way. I thought that we should let the council know or repeat really what you saw in August about the contents of the subpoenas. They seek the identity of the platform users, the address of the rented property, dates and duration of stays, the rates charged, and the total gross revenue collected. That's the basic information we need to undertake an enforcement action. The subpoena alone doesn't produce enough information to start a lawsuit, but it is a great starting point for the zoning enforcement staff to begin inquiry on the property. The next area that I wanted to talk about is the settlement agreement that we prepared in our office with full review by many departments, and that is now in use. We are hoping that this settlement agreement really becomes the primary enforcement tool. It requires the vacation rental owner to do several things, to promise several things. First, to acknowledge that there have been violations at the property. Secondly, to agree to discontinue the vacation rental use permanently. Third, to stop any advertising of the property. Fourth, to submit a tax accounting to the finance director for both transient occupancy and business license taxes. And finally, to agree to permit future city inspection of the property when there is cause to believe there may be a future vacation rental violation. We have 10 settlement agreements completed out of the 39 that have been sent out for discussion. As we expected, and I believe the council should also expect, the initial round of settlement agreements was met with quite a bit of requests for changes and editing and customization of the agreement to different circumstances. We expected that and viewed it to be really a learning experience for us so that we could tailor the ultimate settlement agreement into a form that we could stand firmly behind. Mr. Doimus has considered all of the requests for changes, and we've made many changes. But after what I'd characterize as a learning period, we're going to have a firm settlement agreement that we will not negotiate. I think that's necessary, albeit sounding a bit harsh, in order to have the enforcement process move along at the clip we're going to need to have it move in order to accomplish what we said in August, namely a 2 to 3 year enforcement time frame. There are a couple of areas in particular that we've gotten concerns about in the settlement agreement. The first is that the inspection language that allows the city to make future inspections is very broad. We have had requests to limit that language so that there would need to be some cause for future city inspection. We're working on that. I don't think that's completely unreasonable. And Mr. Doimus is working on a change in that regard that will apply some reasonable cause standard before we can demand inspection by showing up at a property unannounced and knocking on the door. I believe that's important really to accurately portray our shared constitutional interest in respecting the privacy of the vacation rental owners. Secondly, we've had a number of settlement agreement requests to acknowledge that they've already paid TOT and business license taxes. That's kind of a housekeeping detail. It's pretty easy for us to accommodate. I did want to mention that we are not standing on the two major provisions of the municipal code that we have now for enforcement. To refresh everyone, those two areas are the zoning ordinance, which make the vacation rental an unlawful hotel use in many zoning districts. And the second is a section of the business license tax ordinance that says that paying your business license tax does not authorize a zoning violation. So when that ordinance was drafted in the 60s, they looked ahead and saw situations where illegal operations might be subject to the tax even though they were unlawful. That section allows us to enforce despite the claim of reliance we have heard from many people on previous city actions that may have sent a mixed message about vacation rental operations. So in addition to those two provisions, we're looking at a more direct approach, and that more direct approach would be to attempt to reach out to and potentially penalize the vacation rental hosting platforms directly. In my mind, if we can accomplish that, we might have a much more effective enforcement tool because clearly the market in Santa Barbara depends upon the ability to advertise the availability of the units. If we can give the hosting platforms a stake in assuring that what they authorize is lawful, we will have a better shot at even-handed and comprehensive enforcement. Staffing, you saw in the report that since the beginning of December, there have been 1.5 FTEs dedicated in community development to zoning enforcement. They're working on adding another full-time equivalent zoning enforcement officer. Our office has not hired any additional legal help yet. We will. Frankly, most of the work we've had has not been courtroom work, and so I haven't had the demand for filling that kind of position. I expect we will. You will see that we are carrying forward our funding request into next year's budget. And of course, anything that we are unable to spend out of this year's budget will return to the general fund. The council asked us to prepare an informational letter that would go out to as many property owners as we could find, as many vacation rental property owners as we could find, explaining the council's action and the nature of the current enforcement situation. We are awaiting completion of the legislative subpoena process to get that letter out there. We attached a sample letter to your report that we put out there mainly to share the tone we're taking with the public. And I think that's important. I think that we've been very, very careful to calibrate the style of enforcement to the circumstances that the council faced itself with in August as we move ahead. So let me give you some specific language. Uh-oh. I'll fix this. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to read this language, but I'll put it up there for a minute so that council and the audience can take a look at the opening paragraph from the letter. It's direct. I hope it's clear. It's not meant to be threatening. So the message I want the council to take away is that our enforcement efforts are firm, but we hope not presented in a threatening way. The second major paragraph of the informational letter says outright that we're not in this to be punitive. What we're trying to do is address the many issues the council heard in August, the effect on the housing market, the effect on neighborhood compatibility that vacation rentals can cause. So we are clearly offering in this letter an opportunity for vacation rental owners to come forward and resolve the situation without any kind of legal action. The zoning enforcement update begins with August of 2015. I'll remind the council, as I did a minute ago, we projected a 2 to 3 year enforcement effort. And I mention that because while the people we've been involved in enforcement with think we're too tough, there are others in the community that will think we are too slow. And I want to put this in scale. We knew getting into it that the 1,500 or so vacation rentals would take a lot of time and effort to address. So zoning enforcement has 157 pending cases. That's about 10% of the estimated number of total cases. I feel pretty comfortable with that as a start in the first 6 months. I think that percentage will jump, I won't say exponentially, but regularly with each ensuing 6-month period as we build up the enforcement. So if council feels that the enforcement effort is less than what we need, we can talk about the funding we require to increase the level of effort. But that's really what it comes down to, applying the resources we have. I think we've been pretty efficient in applying the resources council allocated. I want to reiterate the enforcement priorities that the council was presented with in August. They've guided our efforts. First, nuisance complaints. These are complaints where a vacation rental, whether they're paying TOT and business license taxes or not, these are cases where that vacation rental is creating a neighborhood nuisance. Those are the top priority. That doesn't mean every complaint that we get, and we have gotten some mass complaints. It means the complaints that are backed by evidence of a nuisance condition existing. Secondly, the second enforcement priority are those single-family R2 and R3 properties that don't have a history of paying the requisite city taxes. Third, the unpermitted hotel eligible zoning districts, the R4 and the commercial zoning districts, where there's no history of paying the transient occupancy tax. Fourth priority, those single-family zoning district located vacation rentals that do have a history of paying the business license tax and TOT, we put them at a lower priority because by and large they're operating without creating a nuisance, and they have made at least a good faith effort to try and comply with the taxing rules. Finally, the very few R4 and commercial vacation rentals that have been paying taxes but have not gone through the permitting process that Ms. Brooke described to you in a memo last week. There is an additional priority that has come to zoning enforcement staff's attention over the last several months, and that is the rather surprising revelation that people are offering as vacation rentals illegal dwelling units. And these may be illegally converted garages or other kinds of structures that don't have any permitting from the city. Because those kinds of rentals present a very, very high public safety concern. It's not a resident who is familiar with the structure, familiar with how to escape during a fire. It's a person who innocently thought they were buying a safe dwelling unit. We think that's the highest level of enforcement, and so the zoning enforcement staff have been collaborating with Building and Safety in our office to escalate those to really a super priority level. And we probably should have anticipated that we would find those kinds of uses, but I do find it surprising that the market tolerates vacation rentals in illegal dwelling units. Finance Department update. Back in June, the council directed that no more business licenses would be issued for vacation rentals. We came to the conclusion in August with the council's discussion of possible amnesty or amortization that those with existing licenses would be allowed to renew until the end of 2016. That is the current Finance Department policy. Back in June, there were 349 vacation rentals known to the Finance Department. That's dropped a little bit, down to 316. The Finance Department has facilitated those 10 settlement agreements. 2 of them have resulted in the payment of back taxes and penalties and a total amount of about $11,000. Those are the facts and figures. I'd be happy to answer questions, as would your other staff.
Okay, questions first, and we do have some public comment. Mr. Dominguez. You want to put on?
Sorry about that. Existing licensees may renew until December 31st, 2016. Is that which category does that include, or is that citywide?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, that would be any of the categories where the vacation rental owner has a history of paying TOT and business license taxes. So people who are in current possession of a business license and are currently paying transient occupancy taxes are being allowed to keep those business licenses through the end of the year. Councilmember Dominguez, you were not on the council, of course, in August. The council's rationale was that there should be some accommodation time for the people who had tried to play by the rules. We advised against a formal amnesty or amortization period because those two concepts are premised on the use being lawful. They're premised on there being a lawful property right at stake. We don't believe there is a recognizable property right in maintaining an unlawful vacation rental. So instead, we took the council's direction to put the people who have been paying their taxes into a lower priority for enforcement. As a practical matter, we probably won't be getting to them until the end of 2016 anyway, unless there are nuisance complaints about the property.
And that's just the case I was wondering about. If we issued or renewed a license and then a month from now they could be an enforcement action.
If there's a nuisance complaint.
Do we have, and this is a separate question, do we have a sense of how many non-conforming uses are taking place in the city? Are we looking at Airbnb or other sites to see who's continued this behavior? Do we have a sense if there's a trend up or down?
I don't. I maybe some of the other staff has a sense of it. I suspect, and this is based on the numbers that we're encountering as we go through this process, that the numbers of vacation rentals has not dropped significantly. If you take a look at what's happened in the finance department among those properties that are paying TOT and business license, about 10% of them have dropped off the market so far. So if our original estimates of around 1,500 units is correct, maybe 150 have dropped out voluntarily. But I couldn't back that number up quantitatively.
Okay, that's one thing if it's possible for staff when they return at future meetings to report on that number. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Colon, I'd like to go back to the settlement agreement part about the inspection and clearly any kind of enforcement regard needs follow-up. But how does the inspection or surprise inspection dovetail with other kinds of enforcements with zoning? Or is this beyond zoning? Because also you mentioned because of the illegal dwellings, there may be building and safety violations. So my questions would be, in terms of the scope of the inspection, what was possibly covered, and number two, is that into perpetuity, or how does that scope of inspection or the length of inspection mentioned in the settlement agreement go off into the future indefinitely?
I believe, Councilmember Rouse, I believe it's indefinite in the current draft, and the scope is not limited. What the settlement agreement attempts to give the city is the ability to do inspections without either consent or a warrant. And in this kind of situation, the standard for a warrant is that we need reasonable cause. So what we're talking about doing after many conversations with property owners and lawyers for property owners is going ahead and adding what is essentially a reasonable cause standard into the inspection rights in the settlement agreement anyway, so that we would have to have some evidence of a new violation before we'd go into the property. I'll defer to zoning enforcement, but my advice to them would be that if they were doing a vacation rental follow-up inspection and they came across a health and safety violation, they should report that and enforce it. I don't think it's appropriate for the city to look the other way at a safety violation when the inspection is being done because of the vacation rental question. How you handle other kinds of zoning violations, for example, if they see an air conditioner in the setback, are they going to enforce? I don't know that that's the case, and I think that they would exercise their discretion to be reasonable at that time.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
I noticed, I think for the first time in this staff report, reference to the nuisance complaint as opposed to just another complaint. And I had some people ask why that word is now in the vernacular. So if maybe staff could explain the distinction.
Mayor Sterner, Councilmember Hart. So nuisance complaint to us is just a regular complaint. Right, and the reason that we call it a nuisance complaint is to differentiate it between the mass complaints. There's at least one, maybe two people who have submitted over 100 complaints about vacation rentals that they don't seem like it directly affects this person, right? Because they're kind of all over town, and so to differentiate between that kind of a mass complaint and someone who says my neighbor is having parties and it's I can't sleep at night. We put the latter type of complaint into what we call the nuisance complaint. This is from an enforcement standpoint, they're just kind of the regular complaints that we would get normally about any number of things. Those are all we consider those nuisances, right? People complain about them because they're having a problem with them, as opposed to, like I said, a mass submittal.
I guess I'll just comment on that later, one-word comment. But.
Okay, why don't we go to public comment? We'll start with Sean, to be followed by Karen. Sean or Karen here? No? Okay. Yes? Okay, just go right ahead. And put your name down. I'll get to you. So then Tom Widrow, be followed by Theo Cracky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Just for the record, I noticed there's a discrepancy between the amounts, at least in the staff report published as a PDF. One on page 3 says $80,000 appropriation in August 2015, and then the next page it mentions $90,000 authorized by council in 2015. So I just thought I'd point that out. Beyond that, just as City Watch is always concerned with, we didn't really take a position on this other than the fiscal impact. Losing over here in the staff report, it says the city receives over $1 million annually from short-term vacation rentals. The city's enforcement efforts will ultimately result in a net loss of revenue of that $1 million. The cost of enforcement has already been funded. But, for a city that's thinking about putting a tax potentially for infrastructure improvement to punt $1 million a year, which would add up over a 20-year bond issue to $20 million, is a lot of money. Also, having to add staff at $90,000 a year over the course of a bond issue, $90,000 adds up quite a bit. And I don't think I heard in the report, no one ever really talked about how much we're really losing in tourist dollars, because assuming that fewer people stay here in Santa Barbara, it's probably a safe assumption. How much does that cost? You lose folks going out to restaurants, not staying in hotels because they're staying in vacation rentals, but whatever entertainment that they do and enjoy, there's some tax revenue there that the city's going to lose. So I just think it's okay to have made that decision, but important to go on record, certainly for City Watch and also for the council, to recognize that we feel okay, obviously, with losing that money, that significant amount of money. Thank you.
Theo Cracky, and then Jenna Berg will be the final speaker.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Theo Cracky. You all know my position on this issue. I just wanted to take this opportunity to, and I know it won't make a difference because the ship has sailed and you're on your way to severe penalties and prohibition of this industry, but the premises that you made your decision on, which is that prohibiting this will increase the supply of long-term housing and reduce rents, is going to be proven soon to not be true. And the idea that this industry was affecting the quality of residential neighborhoods is already proven by the staff report that was published back in June. Everybody agrees there's about 1,000 rentals in the city of Santa Barbara. I know from my experience that they'll get on average 25 reservations a year. That's 25,000 reservations that have been happening every single year in Santa Barbara over the last 10 plus years. The city staff report said that there was 60 registered complaints about short-term rentals since 2004. So to make a decision that this industry is destroying neighborhoods when 6 per year out of 25,000 per year is a problem is, I think, again, a false premise to make this prohibition. I agree with the previous speaker, too, that you're throwing away the baby with the bathwater. There's, with fair regulation, which is I'm a proponent for, and I'll continue to push in spite of the current council's opinion on this, that fair regulation would free up almost $4 million in TOT revenues. Fair regulation could solve the problems of neighborhood compatibility, even though they're not real. It could also, some of that good funding could go to help the supply of long-term housing, even though you'll see that it really doesn't affect it negatively. But that money could be used for many desperately needed infrastructure and other social programs. Finally, I don't know if you've been seen, but finally a formal economic impact report was done countywide. There's 2,550 rentals countywide, which generate $471 million in overall economic impact and provide 5,000 jobs to this county. So I know you've made your decision. I know where it's going. I just really hope that over time you see that this prohibition will probably fail and that there's an opportunity to adopt fair regulation to really make this work for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Hotchkiss has a question.
If I could, Mr. Krake. What are you telling your clients now regarding the city's
because
rules?
we've been playing by the rules for the last 9 years, we have till the end of this year to still accept rentals of less than 30 nights. And then beginning in January of 2017, we will stop taking rentals of less than 30 nights and stick with 30-plus nights. 100% of my property owners are not getting out of, they're not going to use their house 20 to 50% of the year. It's not going to go into the long-term housing market, so they're just going to have less revenues, probably about 40% less revenues.
No, I'm just wondering what you're telling your folks. And when new people come to you now, what do you have to tell them? They want to sign up.
That are within the city limit. If they're in the R4 commercial zone, I tell them there's a potential process to go through. It's very difficult so far. No one's succeeded yet.
Right.
And if they're in R4, we tell them that it has to be 30-night rentals. And they're still doing
R1, R2.
R1, R2, yeah. So we just will tell them we're happy to manage their property, and they're happy to use it for the 3 or 4 months a year they want to use it. But the rest of the time, it'll have to be 30-night rentals only, 30-plus night rentals.
Are you still gaining customers or not?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenna Berg.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider, honorable members of the City Council. Thank you for taking a little time to listen to your citizens today. I just have a long list of questions for you, honestly. I actually have a license to run a short-term rental, and we understand those are going to disappear. I also would love the opportunity to rent out part of my home to people who come to town. So I do have some experience with this in the community. And I just ask you to reach into your hearts and to ask the deep question, do you really believe you're on the right side of this issue? Because I think it's time to reassess whether you are. We have an economic impact report that shows that the city is getting over $230,000 as of 2014 in revenue, local revenue, supporting our shops, our restaurants, our local people who need to pay their mortgages, who are paying property taxes. That's a lot of revenue. Are you willing to let that go and at the same time ask your citizens to pay increased taxes to support the things that you care about, that we all care about? Everyone in this community loves Santa Barbara. That's why we're here. We know you love Santa Barbara. I love Santa Barbara. Theo Krake loves Santa Barbara. We all love Santa Barbara. We want to preserve what we have. But I have done a lot of research on this. I know you have too. What I haven't seen is where's the research to support the affordable housing numbers that you think you're going to generate? Where's the research to support how you're going to generate this revenue? I want to see a $15 minimum wage in Santa Barbara. I want to see us come together, look at this very challenging problem, and come up with some creative solutions. There are people with big hearts in this community, and their big hearts have opened their homes to people from out of town, and they love supporting Santa Barbara and being a host for the city of Santa Barbara. And they're good people who are not doing a disservice to this town, who are not bringing in loud, ruckus parties. They are giving this community a free resource of people who share their love for the city with tourists who come and then spread that. So I just ask you, are you sure you're on the right side? Have you done your homework? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. It's to the council. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Kahlon, the letters that you're sending, I would just say that if I had a short-term rental and I got a letter from the city attorney's office, whatever it says, I'm going to be in shock, you know. So appreciate your attempt to be gentle, if I can put it that way. But might it make sense, and is it possible in that letter to give the recipient a way to end the problem right then and there, if I can put it that way? Considering that enforcement is ultimately expensive and time-consuming, is there or could there be, or should we look into a way of simply bringing it all to a conclusion right there?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, I debated and discussed with my colleagues, including the settlement agreement. That would turn this into a kind of a monster mailing, and I think the settlement agreement would be a bit difficult for people to digest without some explanation. So instead, what we opted for was what I think is a very personal touch. We gave a phone number, our office number, and we also are recycling the vacation rental email address that the community development staff used for information during the summer into a way for people to email us with questions about enforcement after they get this letter. My thought there was that email can provide a degree of privacy or anonymity, and it might be conducive to more interaction with the people to get the letter than if we hit them with a long settlement agreement and a clear route out.
Right, I follow your reasoning. That's good. Are people picking up the phone and calling John? What's happening?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, Deputy City Attorney John Domus. I have gotten calls from people reaching out on us, and that's the most important aspect, for them to reach out and not to ignore the letter. And we've given them consistent time to review the letter and also come back with some terms and suggestions that we would look at. Some we may accept, some that we can't.
Okay, so there's some communication back and forth.
Yes, there is.
Okay, that's good. Mr. Colon, regarding the what I was saying, inspections, do we not want to have the landlord or person, the recipient, whoever we're charging, as it were, present during that inspection so they can understand what we're determining?
That's ideal, and they're certainly welcome to be present. Nothing in the settlement agreement says that they can't be there.
Should we say that outright so they don't feel we're just going to come flying in some ungodly hour?
We'll take that into account. I don't think that would hurt anything.
Okay. I think that's all I've got right now, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
Well, just while we're talking about outreach and the letter, I'm glad the letter's going out, and I understand the logistics of putting the names together in order to send it, so that it's taken some time. I do think it's important that you plan for being able to answer the phone calls, because I do think that there's going to be something that a surge when people get that letter. People will need to have need to have the staffing to accommodate a surge in phone calls and email communications. I'm troubled a little bit by this distinction between nuisance complaints and mass complaints, because fundamentally, the council wrestled with this from two different tracks. One was the traditional neighborhood nuisance complaint track, and many council members spoke to that, and the sanctity of neighborhoods and preserving the residential character of neighborhoods from commercial stuff. But there's another track, which is the housing impacts tract. And that keeps getting missed in this conversation. And folks who are advocates of doing this gloss over that, because I think maybe in their circumstances, they don't see how their operation affects housing impacts. But there absolutely are clear, egregious examples of housing impacts within those mass complaints. Some of the folks who have generated those have made a point of discovering entire apartment buildings that have been turned into vacation rental units. And because those tenants have been evicted and are gone, They're not there to complain in the traditional sense, to make a nuisance complaint. And for whatever reason, it's the kind of neighborhood that isn't generating that. But that's an incredibly important impact in the community. That's, in my judgment, more important in some ways than the nuisance impacts. So I don't know that I support the idea of making a distinction between those. I am hopeful that in the long run, the potential ordinance amendment that would give us access to the hosting sites, in a punitive way with a daily fine for them for failing to cooperate, is going to be more productive than this instance by instance enforcement action. It just makes a lot more sense to be able to go after, the folks that are doing this in a big way, and that's really the issue. When Mr. Crackey says we should be pursuing fair regulation, you may be potentially willing to do that, to work in a scheme that would evolve to a fair, however you term that, regulatory environment. Probably have a lot of disagreements about what that would be, if we could even achieve that. But the bigger companies aren't interested in that at all, and they have been recalcitrant in even entering into that conversation. And we're about to find out how difficult they're going to be in the second tranche of legislative subpoenas. I don't think there's an example around the country of a city that's been really successful in this yet. And yet these housing impacts and the fundamental character changing aspect of this on residential neighborhoods and communities and people's lives, having a place to live, is what's really at stake here. So I think this is incredibly important, and I appreciate all the work the staff's doing to make this happen as fast as possible. This is a big effort, and it's going to take some time, and I'm going to be patient, and I appreciate us coming back every 6 months. It'd be great to have this every 6 months so we can know where this is going, and hopefully next time we'll have even more to report.
Mr. Dominguez?
I'd like to follow up on the one of the last slides, 10 settlement agreements. This is on page 3. 2 owed back taxes and penalties amounting to $11,000. So did the other 8 not owe anything, or we just don't have an amount?
I'm not sure, Councilmember Dominguez. Perhaps Julie Nemes from Finance can answer that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, I'm Julie Nemes, Treasury Manager for Finance. The other 8 were currently paying their TOT and business license, so they did not owe any back taxes.
And the reason I was asking that question is I'm trying to predict out of however many settlement agreements we end up at the end of the day or the end of the year. And does anyone have kind of an approximation?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, right now, I think it's impossible to forecast an approximation. Maybe once this keeps going further, we may be able to, get some data that would kind of show us a trend. But right now, I think it's too early to forecast that.
So is it in the hundreds or thousands?
In terms of potential, it could very well reach that number. Sure.
Which one?
Hundreds or thousands. I think right now it's a little too early, but the numbers could show it could reach 1,000, 1,500. Sure. Quite possibly.
Then we conceivably could be collecting about $1,000 if you just use this kind of as a rough guide per settlement agreement, if the same proportion of people are up to date on taxes, or is this just not statistically significant?
I think it's a good point you raise. I think just my observations, the people that would tend to comply early on and reach out to us are those that probably would initially have paid TOTs, but those who haven't would probably be at the back end or less willing probably to comply, at least on that. So there could be a potential of collecting more as this goes further and further.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate the report and the update. I guess I have a question about and I understand it, I guess, intuitively on the settlement agreement about the ability to visit a property. How would you know just by visiting a property whether it was a vacation rental versus someone else living there? What are you looking for when you inspect a property about a vacation rental? It's different than a building issue or a zoning issue, right? I mean, in terms of what we're looking for. Mr. Cato or Mr.
Yeah,
Klein?
Mayor Schneider, we don't do inspections on vacation rentals right now. We get all the information that we can from internet sites, basically, your VRBOs and Airbnbs, and we use that to go. Once we get a complaint, we verify it based on that type of information, and that's all we need to send an enforcement letter. Because you're right, there is the only difference between a house and a vacation rental is the length of time that people are there. It's not going to look any different once you go there.
So then why would that have to be in a settlement agreement? What are we trying to get? What kind of information, or what are we trying to get out of that as a part of a settlement agreement for permit future city inspection?
Madam Mayor, it's there to be comprehensive and to let the person signing the settlement agreement know that we intend to monitor the situation. The kinds of information we might get would be, for example, a home decorated in a style that suggests independent rentals over a period of time, the manner in which kitchen utensils are available or not, the manner in which bathroom necessities are provided. Those all could give evidence that a recurring vacation rental use would happen. I agree with Mr. Cotto that it would be very fine line kind of information that we would get, but on balance, I felt that it was important to have the right to inspect on reasonable notice, and we're talking about 48 hours notice during the hours of 8 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay. Well, I understand where you're coming from with that. I feel a little uneasy about that just because we're not really looking at a health and safety code issue like you would at a physical inspection. And I think the issue that brought up earlier of what if you find something that is another zoning violation and you happen upon it, then now we're starting another inspection and another potential enforcement case that I could see could expand into something that's beyond the intent of what we were trying to do to begin with. So that one, obviously it's already in the settlement agreement, but I just want to put a little caution into not abusing that provision. And again, I'm not quite. If there was a magnet on the refrigerator saying this is the daily rate for the room, okay, that's kind of obvious. But nice little toiletries in the bathroom. This could be someone who's just having a nice guest room for people who come and visit without paying anything. You see where I'm going with this? So.
Madam Mayor, I do think, though, if you talk to people who've stayed in vacation rentals, there's a different feel towards property that is used full-time as a vacation rental as opposed to someone who lives there and just happens to be on vacation for 2 weeks. It's just kind of obvious, as Mr. Colon said, how it's decorated, what kind of materials are around. There's just a feel, and I think it's a feel that you can recognize. And so if you're asking us to be able to enforce this and put this genie back in the bottle and be able to do it, I think being able to follow up in person to look for the feel of something is important. I certainly get your direction, and I think other council members have mentioned it as well, is you're not looking for this visit to be looking for other zoning violations or something like that. I think Mr. Colon's just saying if you see a health and safety issue, that is a life safety issue, we should follow up on that. Okay. And so I think
there's dangling wires somewhere, that's bad.
Correct.
Yes,
so we'll take the direction on that, and we certainly understand.
Okay. Madam Mayor, if I may, I have spoken to property owners on that issue, and that direct question has come up. And we talk about receiving a reasonable complaint, and whether maybe an advertisement or a complaint from a neighbor. An inspection could show signs of temporary staying. Doesn't mean it's definitive evidence. It could be suitcases around. It could be no family pictures. But it's a look at comprehensive evidence, of looking at that along with the other evidence that we would gather. But I have addressed that issue. So it's a common.
Thank you, and I appreciate that sensitivity. I just, wanted to express that. And then, I know the council, we all decided to go in a certain direction, and I've said this publicly. I'll just say it again since we're at this topic that I still think if there was 5 votes for a home sharing option, that's worth at some point pursuing. I don't think today is the day to figure that out, but I just want to let. And that is separate from a unit that's vacant year-round. This is where a property owner is living in the property and has a home sharing kind of arrangement one way or another. But that's a topic for another day. But I thought I'd bring that up because I know there's been some public comments about where do we go from here. So with that, some other lights are on. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of points to add to that. I could see with the inspection that clearly one of the areas where this has gone is into home sharing, and it has to be that if the home sharing, and even that, there are a couple of forms of home sharing. There's sharing my entire home or for a limited period of time, and then there's sharing a portion of my home. And the sharing a portion of my home piece is going to be tilting in the direction of basically the illegal unit, full living unit within the house. It's going to be an apartment. If you're going to be able to get more money for a place that's got a stove and fridge and such like, and is basically an apartment within a residence, and obviously the inspection process would at least have the requisite dolly that has the stove attached to it that gets wheeled out back as part of that. I also want to comment on the sort of to Mr. Crackey's comments about the lack of compatibility in a neighborhood. My non-quantitative experience with this was in our neighborhood. There was real evidence of the incompatibility. It just was. There also was evidence of the home sharing that was done in proper spirit. So I want to sort of agree with the mayor on that aspect of it. If only there were a way to grab the spirit of that, not just the letter of it, but the spirit of it, and have that come forward. It sounds like there are just so many ways to evade that it makes it impossible to enforce and so forth and so on. But we got to see it in our neighborhood. I got to hear from neighbors that were experiencing the problems of the compatibility. And I also I appreciate Mr. Hart's comments about the housing stock. When you start hearing, and I in my land use planning business are starting to hear of folks, buying homes in town. I had not seen the apartment building that had been converted, but I have heard of folks that are buying opportunely located homes and are able to fund a bona fide mortgage, a mortgage on a million two home with a vacation rental program, and it's certainly off the permanent rental market, and that goes downhill to people who aspire to live here. So this is obviously one of the tougher areas that we've had to struggle with in my time here, and I wish there were a finer grain that we could have to regulate this.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to go on the record, I do continue to oppose home sharing. Absolutely not. I trust staff when they told us that it would be too difficult to enforce. I do support the inspection on 48 hours notice. There's too much profit to be made here, and we need to continue to monitor. And then I'd like to add that when I was going door to door in my election last November, you can tell when it's a vacation rental. Sometimes there's a number pad on the door. It was pretty obvious to tell. And also, if it means anything, the neighbors totally know what's going on. The neighbors would tell me, oh yeah, that's a vacation rental, and so is that one. And they didn't like it much either. I mean, a lot of people they weren't going to complain, they were living their lives, but you could tell they told me they would prefer a long-term neighbor who they knew and could get to know and be part of the community. Thank you.
Okay, well, we don't need a motion on this. This is just to receive a report, and we received it. And so thank you very much. We look forward to hearing updates as they come. And with that, we'll move on to item number 15.
Item number 15, Capital Improvement Program Status Report, second quarter fiscal year 2016.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our new city engineer, Brian Demore. Brian's been with the city about 9 years, and also has experience in the private sector. He came to us as a project and then principal engineer, has a lot of experience in design, construction, and a great ability for program and division management. So we're happy to have him here today to give you an update on the capital improvement program. As soon as we get the PowerPoint back up.
End of slideshow.
There
All
we
right.
go.
Thank you, Rebecca. So, yes, thank you, Rebecca. Madam Mayor, City Council members, it's an honor to be in front of you today to present this report. Rebecca coached me earlier today. Hopefully I won't embarrass her with this, but she said two things. Remember to introduce yourself and make sure you smile. So, again, I'm Brian DeMoore, city engineer, and here's a smile. So I got those two things out of the way, and we'll move on to the report. I'll be presenting the Capital Improvement Program status report for the second quarter fiscal year 2016. And what I'd like to do as part of this report, I think you've seen in the past where we highlight our capital projects, but I'd also like to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do as the engineering division, just a chance to market my group in a way, take the opportunity to do that since I'm new, and hopefully educate you a little bit on the services that we provide for the city. And then I will have a couple of short videos, one with a map showing where you can get project information. So I think this is a useful forum to present that so the public can be aware that that's available. And we also have a video highlighting the completed Coda Street Bridge project. So engineering division for City of Santa Barbara, we are an integral part of the Public Works Department. We provide internal engineering services to other divisions within Public Works, including transportation, water resources, and facilities. In addition, we provide engineering services for other city departments, including airport, waterfront, library, parks and rec, and whoever else calls and needs services. Sometimes it could be risk management or the attorney's office asking questions. So a wide range of engineering services that we provide, from in-house studies, design. We also provide construction management and inspection for our capital projects. So those are some of the more traditional engineering roles that we perform, but there's also the engineering land development piece where we have people who are an integral part of the overall land development team for the city, and they review private development projects, particularly focusing on how those projects interface with public works, so with the right-of-way or water utilities that may cross onto their property. And let's see, moving down the list here, we also have traffic engineering. If anybody's worked with Derek Bailey, I hope you realize we have a great traffic engineer here with the city. And we have 2 senior real property agents, so they are always on the lookout for the city's interests concerning real property. And we are the keeper of survey records and maintain important project archives. We call that the map vault. If anybody's been down at the Garden Street office, you'll see there's a big heavy metal door. So if the whole building was destroyed, hopefully our record drawings would still exist. So I'm sure I've forgotten a few other things that we do, but those are some of the key highlights that came to mind. And now I'd like to get into this map that I was talking about. This is an online map that's been developed over the years, but I think now we've gotten it to the point where I thought it would be good to present it in front of council. And City TV put together a great video, so that saves me from trying to explain it. So I'll go ahead and click on this, and that should...
Have you ever passed a construction project and wondered what it was for? Maybe you've heard of a major proposed project and would like to participate in the public process, but don't know where to start. Or maybe you've had to take a detour because of construction and would like to know how long it will last. Well, wonder no more. The city has a webpage that has the answers.
The Major Project Maps was created about 5 years ago. Public Works Engineering created it to provide information to the public in a map format so that people, when they see a project around town, they have a map they can go to and they can click on a link to get more information about the project.
Major projects are differentiated in a couple of ways. Projects in the design phase are shown in blue, and those under construction are in red. Easily understood icons are used to delineate what kind of project is at that location. For example, a red bridge represents the Coda Street Bridge project.
The information we have on each project is, first of all, a project description or what the project is, what the project benefits, so you as a member of the public, how you will benefit from the project. We have some very basic information about the project, when the project is anticipated to go into construction, an approximate cost, where the funding comes from, and then, of course, we have the contact information for the project engineer that's managing the project, phone number and email address, and if you have more questions, you can contact them.
The mobile-friendly webpage is easily accessed from the city's homepage at santabarbaraca.gov. You just click on the construction activity link in the most popular sidebar on the left. Only major city projects are listed, no private ones. So what qualifies as major?
A major project is typically what we call a public works contract, which is a public improvement project, which is typically going to be a project over $100,000, an improvement as opposed to a maintenance and repair project. They're always city-funded projects, so not a private land development project or utility work in the right-of-way. They're true city public works projects.
All right. Great. So back onto the presentation and
quick question to get to that. Is that on the home page, the major projects?
I believe it is a link
on the
left side, right on the home page.
All right.
Don't go checking.
Mr. Casey's now going to check.
So let's see. What do I need to do here now to advance? Okay. Thank you. So back to the projects now. So highlights from the second quarter. We completed 7 projects. Now, we consider a project complete once a notice of completion has been filed. So a good example, some of you were at the ribbon cutting for the Coda Street Bridge not too long ago. That's still technically an active project. There's some landscaping, some other miscellaneous items that the contractor needs to do. But from the public's perspective, we consider that to be complete. It's open, but there is some work remaining. So probably on the next CIP status report, you'll see that project enter the completed project list. Projects in construction, we have 37, and in design, we have 31 now. One thing to be aware of, not all CIP projects go through the engineering division. I would say most of them do, but there are some other departments and divisions that do put out their own capital work. So I'm doing my best to try to pull that in, and hopefully with time we'll get a little bit more, be a little bit more inclusive with this report. But I would say we've captured most of the capital work that's happening. And that's been the same in the past when Pat Kelly was here, trying to grab all that information. So the completed projects, we have a list here of the 7 that's included in the attachment in the CAR. I'm not going to go through and read that list. It is available in the council report. But a couple projects I did want to highlight one is the Lower West Downtown Lighting Project, Phase 2. This increased street and pedestrian level lighting on the 100 through 400 blocks of West Coda Street, as well as the 500 and 600 blocks of Castillo, Bath, and De La Vina Streets, plus Dibble Ave and Bradbury Avenue. So this was a great project. I think generally everybody really likes these lighting projects, and it was successfully completed. Just wanted to highlight that one. 75 streetlights, and it was primarily funded through the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Next project completed that we wanted to highlight was the Alameda Park well relocation, infrastructure, and site restoration. So kind of a lengthy title. The well was originally constructed in 1990. and it's a necessary water supply source for potable water. In 2013, it became unusable, I think due to sedimentation, sanding. So this project was needed to get that supply back online, and it is now completed. Unfortunately, looking at the grass is kind of a sad picture, but I think they did what they could to restore that, but with the drought, hard to get everything green again. So now the project's in construction. We have 37 with an approximate value of $90 million. That is the contract value, not the project cost. And those 37 projects are listed in the CAR by category, not individually. And there's a handful of those I did want to highlight. Some work that is ongoing. We have a wastewater main rehabilitation, and that consists of cleaning, rehabilitation, and video recording of sewer pipes, and that's scheduled for completion in spring of 2016. So this is kind of a funny picture. You may wonder what's happening there, and I believe this is a relining, a slip lining of a sewer pipe. So they basically have, it's almost like a balloon where they inflate it into the pipe, and then they blast, I don't know if it's just steam to cure it, so a hot air, and it cures, it inflates within the pipe, and then it cures, and then the contractor has to go back in and cut out all of the laterals so that people can continue to have service. So that's a way of preserving the life of the pipe without having to dig up the street. So if you ever see or smell that work happening, hopefully you'll understand what's going on. Next project is the Santa Barbara High School wellhead. Another well that was originally constructed and was having difficulties with production. I think this one was more of a odor issue, whereas the other one was just having trouble getting the water out of it. So this is on the northwest corner of 700 East Anapamu. And when the Ortega groundwater treatment plant came online, we had a means to now treat this water. So we put in a raw water feed line to the Ortega treatment plant, and we're able now with the new wellhead to treat that water and get it into the city's system. Next project is Coda Bridge, and we have another video, so I'll go ahead and play that one. Again, thanks to City TV.
The new and improved Coda Street Bridge is now complete. Originally built in 1914, the structure represents one in a series of much-needed replacement projects by the city's Public Works Department.
A lot of these bridges on Lower Mission Creek and throughout the city are roughly 80 to 100 years old, so the time is right to get these things replaced and hopefully get another 80 to 100 or more years out of the next structure.
Coda Street marks the city's fifth successful bridge replacement since 2012, with projects at Mason and Cabrillo Streets currently in progress. The rebuilt bridges offer numerous benefits, and funding from the Federal Highway Administration mitigates costs to the city.
Generally, we get about 90% if you looked across the whole program to complete this work. So it's been a great opportunity to grab hold of federal funds to not only maintain our infrastructure on the street side, but also to increase flood control.
Building bridges with these benefits requires a multi-step process, including a design phase that begins years before construction. Public Works started planning to replace the Coda Bridge in 2009, and construction crews finally broke ground at the site in March of 2015. In order to accommodate the project, the city purchased 3 homes immediately adjacent to the bridge. The houses, which now have greater protection from the creek, will go on auction soon.
First part was demo, clear the area. In order to do this work, we sort of had to create a large work area around the bridge. So we drove piles and created walls to separate and hold back the existing soil and then remove the entire bridge.
With the old structure gone and a wide open site, it was time to build a bigger, better bridge.
A lot of construction activity, building the forms, pouring the concrete, and then placing the bridge deck itself.
It can be difficult to complete such a major project in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Construction took place mere feet from some private residences, making cooperation with the community a major priority.
I've walked around and personally spoken to most of the neighbors, tell them what's going on, and have them contact me directly to see if they're having any issues, whether it be noise, dust control, hours, a wide variety of things. But certainly trying to work very closely with them because we are here in their front yard for nearly a year.
With that year of construction now complete, the new bridge allows more stormwater to flow safely under Coda Street and protects essential utilities along Mission Creek.
In recent years, and I believe in the 95 floods, the neighbors were telling me how water overtopped this bridge was flowing down Coda Street, and so they're very excited about avoiding that the next time. So this structure is a little bit wider than the previous structure, and it will have a larger flow capacity.
As life returns to normal on Coda Street, the Public Works Department turns its attention to more bridge replacement projects, scheduled for 2016 and beyond.
Okay, so thank you, City TV, for that. And moving on, I have one more completed project I wanted to highlight, and that's the Laguna Lot Permeable Paver Project. Again, there was another ribbon cutting, so some of you are well aware of that project. That was a project where engineering did the design. Facilities went out and applied for a Prop 84 stormwater grant. They were successful in obtaining that grant, and they brought engineering services on board to help them deliver on the design, and they had their own staff manage construction. So that was a successful completion, and hopefully we'll see some rain hit that in the next few days. All right, and then the last category is design in progress. We've got 31 on the list, and the total is over $107 million. That's the total project cost, and I will highlight a couple of those projects. We have another paver project. This one is the LID Stormwater Infiltration Project on Quarantina Street. This is phase 2 of the project. Phase 1 was the one that was around Alice Keck Park, Memorial Gardens, and the Plaza Veracruz. So this is phase 2. It's part of the same grant. Creeks went for the stormwater grant. Again, it's Proposition 84, and they applied Measure B for the local city match and brought city engineering services on board to do the design. That design is actually complete, and it will be at council, I believe, a week from today to award the contract. Next, we have an active transportation program. This was a grant that we received a couple of years back for a multi-use path along not just Las Positas Road, but also MODOC. And this is in design. There was an open house in January where the city and its consultant presented the conceptual path layout to the community, and we generally received very positive feedback about this project. There will be additional opportunities for public review. The grant that we got for this is for design only. So hopefully there'll be an ATP grant available for construction as this thing gets closer to that point. But right now, just design. Last project on the list is the Braemar Force Main installation, and this will install a redundant wastewater force main at the Braemar Sewer Lift Station. You might ask, what is a force main? And basically that's where the sewer flows downhill and it reaches a point where you can't go down anymore, and you've got to pump it and have a pressurized pipe. So when you have pressure flow, there's greater risk if the infrastructure fails, and with only one pipe, there's just less flexibility to do maintenance. So this will install a redundant force main along that line. Project is planned for construction in June of 2016. So that is the end of the list. If anybody has any questions or even
I don't see any
comments.
speaker slips, or do we?
No, Madam Mayor,
No,
but
ma'am.
I would like to be happy to report that on the main page of the city's website, on the left-hand side, there's a most popular tab, and included in that is a link to construction activity, and that takes you right to what you saw the video on.
Great. Okay, I don't see any speaker slips, so it's to the council. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking of major construction projects, Mr. Moore, we had talked, or actually your Pat Kelly would tell you about some particularly irritating merchants. That would probably have been me, who always complain about projects downtown, usually private, not public projects, utilities and whatnot. And we have some major Edison work on tap coming up. And at one time, we had spoken within that department about the possibility of mapping and or having more timely updates about permits that have been pulled so that people could anticipate construction, drilling, trenching outages that the general public and certainly the downtown business community could access and know exactly when things are going to get barricaded. Is that a discussion that's happening now within your department? Because, like I said, this is the major public projects. And I know it's probably a time-consuming thing to do, but I think it would be a very valuable tool for the department to have. Any chats about that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse. Yes, we have had some discussions about that, and I think the key thing is going to be coming up with a threshold for what would qualify a project to show up on a map like that on the private side, because you can see from the numbers here with capital, we're in the less than 100 number of project ballpark. It's kind of easy to manage that. With the private project, it's well into the hundreds, and they can be a lot of small things that just pop up and then disappear. But there's certainly plenty of big stuff like what's going on State Street with Entrada. Something like that would be nice to have, more of a blip on the radar, where if the public's driving by, they don't know necessarily that it's a private versus a public project, but they might want to get some information about it. So I think it would be good, and we have had some discussions about that, but we haven't reached any kind of implementation on how to get more of the private project information available to the public.
Well, once again, I mean, I think John Owasiak was part of these discussions as well. We talked about how much infrastructure Edison was going to work on and when and how that was going to be scheduled. And certainly the outages, other than the door hanger that says, by the way, you're not having power tomorrow, because they do have to come in and pull permits. I assume that the timing is somewhat in our wheels. I know it's not totally under our control. Depends on how it comes down the pipeline. And then there's also Mr. Casey and I were talking about this a little bit yesterday, talked about when construction was staged and what parts of downtown and the El Pueblo Viejo, what times certain kinds of construction wouldn't happen, i.e. between the hours of 11 and 2. Things that have been talked about that I don't think are necessarily in the code, but they are cooperative ways to get the entire community involved and prepared, and maybe save you and people like Mike Clunan a lot of time and phone calls if that kind of information were a little more readily available to all of us.
Right.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Well, welcome then in your new position. I still remain concerned about the changes at our surveyor's office. Can you assure me that customer service will continue? Because I understand the private sector oftentimes checked in with the city surveyor's office for information.
Yes, so we believe that we're going to be able to provide the customer service that's necessary. We still have one of the employees from the survey crew who's employed with the engineering division, and he's very well up to speed on that. We're not wanting to rely on him to do all of this work, but he can get different people up to speed on that. We're occupying that old survey office, so that's where a lot of the old records are kept, and that's where our 2 senior real property agents are. And I believe that that's something that they can provide if we're talking about the random person who knocks on the door and is trying to pull an old map to get some information. We do still want to be able to provide that to the community. And then as far as just continuing with the workload, we think we've already been using consultants and using the county to do some of the work. And so far that's been working out. That's come up basically just out of necessity because the city surveyor did leave and we needed to continue on.
Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a little off the wall, but the fact that you went to the webpage and found that brings it to mind. Could we have a report at some point about the success of our web pages and where visits are and that sort of stuff? Doesn't have to be complex, but it might be nice to find out, just if nothing else, have a baseline. Thank you.
Little tour. And on that topic, great report, and look forward to seeing that more on the website. And I appreciate the Finance Committee earlier today. You started your conversation about funding and infrastructure, and I'll look at that tape later on. This is a great educational opportunity for people interested in infrastructure, and especially where the money comes from. And so I'm wondering if part of those extra info about where the finances is, it just listed federal bridge grant without an explanation of really what that means, or if it's city money or outside grant money, or how do we leverage that funding. I mean, that's all we've been having those conversations a lot in the last few years, and the more people understand the restrictions of what funds come from where and why, and that might be a great page just to put that in. For example, the permeable pavers, leveraging small Measure B money with that big Prop 84 funds to make that happen, I think is good information to show that we're doing what we can to leverage local funds for outside grants, and that helps the conversation moving forward. So that's a great place to put that information. So just a suggestion, but it's a great spot to have there, and it's a nice interactive part of the website. I really appreciate it. Anything else? Okay, again, this is we don't need a motion on this, and so we accepted the report, and thank you again. We move on to any council member committee assignment reports. Mr. Hart.
I attended the Police and Fire Commission meeting last week where Mr. Casey made a presentation about both the status of the police station itself, the physical status of the building, as well as his recruitment process for the police chief. And then last night I attended the Allied Homeowners Association meeting where they wanted to talk about vacation rentals. So the timing was good in regards to the presentation today about enforcement efforts.
Great. Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was a well-attended and very well-done, informative youth council-sponsored event last night on preventing cyberbullying. And for anyone who has young people in their lives, they can be so cruel, right? Bullying, but when they do it on social media, it's viral and it's painful. And they broke out the workshop, parents and teens, and then brought us back together. Very, very well done. And I wish they could do it again and have it televised, because it was informational. For people like me that don't do all the social media, there's so many ways for bullying to take place. I attended an immigration forum at Casa de la Raza last Thursday, specifically helping farm workers get their papers. There was a great food bank event. I think this was last week, and I didn't get a chance to report about it, looking at food security on the west side specifically. And then our Living Wage Committee met a couple of weeks ago and was looking at different ways to make sure that ordinance is carried out in our city. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended this is more information on oak trees and the Kachuma Operation and Maintenance Board. Some 800, and we had a meeting update on that. Some 800 new trees have gone in the ground in the last 2 months. And that's now we are in year 8 of this oak tree This is a mitigation of a mitigation. I have to keep repeating that because it's such an amazing thing that this country even does that stuff, where we have the mitigation of the steelhead, which is raising the level of the dam to hold some more water back to manage the steelhead population. And then that killed a bunch of oak trees. So now we're planting oak trees in order to mitigate that. And that's what's going on now. We're in year 8 of that. We've gotten very good at it. And one sort of spillover effect that makes good sense would be to use oak trees on the front country here to reduce fire hazard. They're a much less hazardous plant than the chaparral, and it's obviously a native plant here. So it's in the Mission Canyon area that is being looked into as a again, all of this is long-term planning stuff. But anyway, very interesting. And then the other piece of the Kachuma Operation Maintenance Board, which we're obviously super interested in, is the moving of the barge. We'll be hearing much more about that. It's a regional issue, and there's been lots of I won't say conflict, but at least strong dialogue on the topic, and that by this time next week we should have a clearer picture whether the region, both the folks in the San Ynez Valley as well as the South Coast have gotten together, hopefully to make a full agreement to move that barge, which we need to do in order to be able to continue to pump water out of the lake.
Mr. Dominguez?
I attended the Cars Are Basic meeting on, was it Wednesday night? And Greg was there as well, and we talked a little bit about projects in the city and the county. And then Saturday, I had the great honor and pleasure to help judge the mock trial competition. It's a regional mock trial, and then they go on to do a state competition. And San Marcos and Dos Pueblos came in first and second, so it was great to see them do so well. And it was exciting to see that our city high schools are participating in these competitions and bringing back glory and doing really well. I see the sports teams have been in the news a lot lately, too, so keep your eyes out.
Okay, great. We have a closed session.
Conference with City Attorney, anticipated litigation.
And we will adjourn from there, and we will adjourn to Monday, March 7th at 1:30 at 1818 Castillo Street for a site visit, since that's on appeal for next week. Thank you very much.
I'm all there now, but I'd rather be punch drunk.